So the clothing brand Fred Perry has taken a bit of a hit in the last few years because it was adopted as the uniform of this far-right group, the Proud Boys. But despite that association, the brand is still alive and well. Today on the podcast, how younger artists are embracing Fred Perry. I'm Elamin Abdelmahmoud. This is Commotion. All right, I think maybe the place to start today is right here. And look, heads up, it's a bit loud. From 1994, that is Rancid with the Ballad of Jimmy and Johnny. I'm starting here because this is a song that references a bunch of subcultures. You have references to mod, to punk, to ska, and the things that unite them all. You might have missed the lyric there because it was so loud, but the lyric was skinheads, tats, and Fred Perry. When you think about Fred Perry, the clothing brand, maybe the thing that comes to mind is cool, timeless style. But also, you've probably seen the famous laurel wreath that they have as a logo. You've maybe seen Liam Gallagher or Drake wearing Fred Perry. But here's the thing. In the last few years or so, a few years back, Fred Perry picked up a very different and highly unwelcome association. This really distinctive black and yellow polo shirt that they make was adopted by the far-right group, the Proud Boys. It's an association that the brand itself was quick to denounce. But now we're seeing a new wave of black singers and rappers embracing the brand. The group chat is here to talk about all of this. Rollie Pemberton, a.k.a. rapper Cadis Weapon, is here. And John McCann, who's a musician and a longtime Fred Perry fan, who's now a wholesale rep for the brand in Canada, is here. Rollie and John, welcome to the show, everybody. How's it going?
Hey, what's good?
Hello. I'm delighted.
Good. How are you?
I'm delighted that you're both here. John, look, I'm going to start with you, man. I'm going to start maybe you can give us a bit of a history lesson. Fred Perry is a brand that was launched in the early 50s. British tennis player, the same name. That's how it launched. Tell us a bit about like, who Fred Perry was and how his personality ended up being reflected in the wreath, but also in this brand in general.
Yeah, it's an interesting story. He's from a working class background in Stockport, which is up near Manchester. His father was a cotton spinner, which might have helped pave the way later to working in clothing. He started actually his sports career started in table tennis, and then he switched to tennis where he rose through the ranks to be still today the most decorated British tennis player ever. He was pretty flamboyant. He used to jump the net to shake his opponent's hand, presumably after he demolished him. Yeah, and not initially accepted, as the tennis was a bit of a snobby sport, the elitist type of crowd didn't really welcome him, but working class everyman really did. And that was sort of the genesis of the brand, was this guy who rose through the ranks from a humble beginning to start this clothing brand. And, interestingly, he used the laurel wreath, which is, I'm wearing. And yeah, but it was a champion symbol of Wimbledon at the time, which I don't think you'd get away with just using someone else's logo today, certainly. So that was kind of cool. And then ultimately, interestingly, actually, he smoked a pipe and he considered using a pipe as the logo, which I'm not too sure.
I don't know if that would have gone as well. Yeah.
No, I don't know if we'd be having this conversation if he had went with the pipe. But yeah.
Do you want to maybe give us real quickly the history of how a working class tennis player goes on to dominate this sport that is mostly sort of upper class, seen as like an upper class kind of sport? How does this line of tennis wear become something that like mods and punks and rude boys actually wanted to wear? How do we make that jump?
Well, I think it's kind of a twofold thing. One of which is I think they identified with him, primarily working class guy that, rose through the ranks and won everything. They liked his working class background. Secondly, and maybe almost importantly, was that PK cotton, which the Fred Perry shirt is still made from, was bordering on a technical fabric for the time. So it was actually breathable. and it held its shape well, so you could, go out and dance all night and wake up and throw it on again if you had to wear the same shirt the next day. But I think really it was a lot of his affiliation with being working class that really drew those subcultures to the brand initially.
Okay, Rollie, over to you, pal. What's the first thing that comes to mind when you think Fred Perry? How does Fred Perry enter your world as a rapper in the 2000s?
Well, in my mind, I would see Fred Perry and associated with the sound clash culture. I'm into a lot of UK music. You
Yeah.
think of the Rude Boys, like the original Skinheads and stuff. And for me, I feel like there was a bit of a resurgence in the early 2000s of the Rude Boy fashion. I remember like Vice magazine, they were really big into that at the time. And you were seeing people rocking the Fred Perry polo shirt, and I remember back growing up in Edmonton, there was a mod club party.
Yeah.
And people would DJ and they'd play all the British music, and it would be like rocksteady and ska, and everyone would be dressed like this, rocking Fred Perry,
Yeah.
and you'd see like Lady Sovereign, like grime rappers rocking it back in the early 2000s.
I love the idea of you sort of like exploring the scene, and as you see it, you kind of begin to see the Fred Perry thing as like almost a uniform, as a part of just like what the scene sort of looks like. I think what's stuff, John, is that for the past few years, like the way that we've been accustomed to seeing Fred Perry has been the story. Okay, so Vice magazine had a role in Fred Perry's sort of ongoing popularity, but then one of Vice's co-founders, Gavin McInnes, he later went on to found this far right group called the Proud Boys. It's a group that's been linked to numerous acts of political violence in the U.S. Is currently on the Canadian government's list of terrorist entities. We should say under his leadership, the Proud Boys became kind of known for wearing this black and yellow Fred Perry polo shirt. Just quick, how did it make you feel to see that?
Oh, it's massively disappointing. And it's and also puzzling because, anyone who looks at the brand, their social media, their website, it's pretty clear where they land. You know what I mean? I think they're a highly inclusive, diverse brand. So to see that was sad, and it hurt my business a bit in the U.S. also.
I know that Fred Perry's pulled that shirt, like that shirt that Proud
Yeah,
Boys
they
wear.
did. So
it's no longer
it
available.
Came out of my showroom. We recalled any retailer who had it. They sent it back. We dealt with it. Fred Perry dealt with it the best they could. They stopped selling that shirt to anyone with a Canadian or U.S. address. You couldn't order it online. So they made it difficult. But, people draw their own conclusions. It's a branded product. Sometimes people don't do the homework and they see these people wearing the clothes and they draw their own conclusions, like I said. And that could be damaging. But again, look no further than the brand itself and look at their, the way they conduct themselves. And it's just obvious, for anyone who takes the time that that's not at all, they're not aligned.
Rollie, I want to talk
with those values.
Rollie, I want to talk about the idea of subtly the brand is everywhere. You see it on the news a lot, but not for the reasons that you would want to necessarily rep the brand. What did the Proud Boy situation sort of affect your willingness to wear the wreath out?
Yeah, it definitely made me think I won't be wearing this for a minute.
Okay.
Yes. That's for sure. Because you don't want to be mistaken as part of this group, right? But that's the weird thing about fashion is it's a lot of fashion is really just about representing you're part of a particular community or a scene, or maybe that you're opposite to a particular scene.
Yeah.
And the whole thing with the Proud Boys adopting the style is it's really this perversion of the original skinhead and like reggae and mod style that was really cool.
Yeah.
And then it's swung and very left leaning to swinging all the way around to becoming this really conservative thing.
Yeah, I think I want to sort of move us even further down the line because the timeline has been challenged by something new. Because hopefully that chapter is maybe over and done with because we're seeing a new wave of artists wearing Fred Perry, reminding us that, like it has always been this kind of like subversive, this inclusive kind of brand. I want you to take a listen to this. This was recorded by one of our producers at a recent event in Toronto. You are listening to a recording that is from an iPhone.
My name's Bobby. His name's Bobby. We are... I don't know who to address. We are two Bobs in the pod, the Metallica murderers, the Kerrang band killers, the slam dunk hooligans, the most important band in punk rock, the most important band in Britain, the cutest band in punk rock, the friendliest band in rock and roll, the Fred Perry Mafia. Don't disrespect the reef, mate. You never disrespect the reef.
The Fred Perry Mafia never disrespect the wreath. That is British rap duo Bob Vylan on stage in Toronto last month. In case you didn't hear that clearly, yeah, they called themselves the Fred Perry Mafia. They told their fans to never disrespect the wreath. I want to talk about this, John. I think that's interesting. What do you make of that? What do you think these young rappers are drawing from to sort of say to position themselves as the Fred Perry Mafia?
Well, first of all, I think it's awesome. And I think there's a certain, they are sort of punk rock, they are rap, but they definitely have an edge, and I think some of that edge does harken back to some of the subcultures of the past that have championed Fred Perry. I think there is some commonalities there, but I think, there has been a move on. Things are a bit cyclical, but, Blur was huge. Wore Fred Perry, Damon Albarn started Gorillaz, which kind of dips into that, a different sort of cultural touch point. And then, of course, Fred Perry's done collaborations with tons of people, one of which was a Belgian designer named Raf Simons, Skepta, Drake. They really love that stuff. So, it's a tapestry that's woven, and every time someone adopts the brand, they become part of it, and then it gets built on from there. So I think that's part of what we're seeing. But I think it's the attitude. I think there's a certain attitude, especially with Bob Vylan, that's got, a little bit of oomph, which resonates.
Yeah, the subversive thing is kind of very straightforward with Bob Vylan, but also I should say, Rollie, Bob Vylan are not the only artists who are reclaiming the wreath, so to speak. The British DJ, producer, and singer Nye Archives just played Toronto, Montreal last week, featured prominently in a current Fred Perry campaign. What do you think the appeal is for a new generation to have a different relationship with Fred Perry, especially given the thing we were talking about, the idea that for at least a couple of years, it was a little bit hijacked by something else?
Yeah, I think in a weird way, it's the beauty of fashion. It's Fred Perry is just so iconically English, and I think that's why you see somebody like Nia Archives wearing it. She does a lot of stuff around Britishness, like she's painting her nails with the Union Jack, all that kind of thing. Yeah. So I feel like in England, for kind of the hardcore continuum of music, where there's grime or like drum and bass, jungle and stuff, Fred Perry is kind of like Ralph Lauren would be for hip hop heads in North America.
Yeah, I should also say, Rollie, this is something that people maybe don't necessarily know about you, that like you're a writer, you're a rapper, but also you recently launched a secondhand clothing store on Instagram called Search Vintage. You're someone who pays attention to fashion. Do you see Fred Perry as a brand that is kind of returning to a cachet that it once had?
Yeah, definitely. I feel like the history is just so long. That's the thing with brands with like a strong identity. It's gonna swing the other way eventually, and it doesn't take much, right? Like a lot of people don't remember this or don't even know this, but Fred Perry for a while it got associated with the National Front in the 80s, and that was totally wiped away when Blur puts it on in the 90s, right? So it doesn't take much. It could be just like Billie Eilish wearing it tomorrow, and then it's just like everybody's rocking it. So I think the thing about fashion too is the stuff that really endures are the cool connotations, not the negative ones. And if you think about like blue jeans, when at one point people would be wearing skinny jeans, now everyone's wearing baggy jeans, but it's going to go back the other way. So you just got to trust in that ebb and flow. And I think Fred Perry's due for a comeback right now.
Rollie, I've already started going the other way. I'm already back to wearing skinny jeans, but I appreciate that some people are not doing so. I got to leave it there, but John and Rollie, this has been wonderful. Thank you for your time.
Thanks for having us.
Yes, of course. Anytime. Rollie Pemberton is a writer and rapper, also known as Cadence Weapon, and John McCann is a musician and wholesale rep for Fred Perry in Canada. We were talking about the popularity of Fred Perry clothing among a new generation of artists and how they're embracing the brand. I'm Elamin Abdelmahmoud, and this is Commotion. Look, we've talked on the show a lot about the way that superhero movies have dominated the box office for the last 2 decades or so, from Avengers to Spider-Man. Usually, like, there's something kind of formulaic about these movies. You mostly know what to expect from them, which is that they are going to, by the end, set up the next movie in the franchise. It's why we've needed phrases like cinematic universe to describe just kind of how sprawling these movies are. And you know as well as I do that like there is a core principle at work here, and that core principle is make as much money as humanly possible, which makes these movies honestly like an easy target for satire. And now we have that. We have the franchise, which gets at all of this. It's like it's a new HBO series from Armando Iannucci, who's the man who created Veep, John Brown from Succession, and also director Sam Mendes, all of them collaborating on this. Rad Simonpillai is back on the show. He's seen a whole bunch of these episodes. He's here to talk about it. Rad, welcome to the show, pal.
Thanks for having me. I love that you brought the biggest Marvel hater you possibly could for this conversation.
This is your day. This
Exactly.
is your day. Okay, get in there. Set up the franchise. What is the franchise?
So yeah, it's basically about the people on the set for one of these superhero movies as part of a big, multi-universal franchise. And really we're following the first assistant director, played by Himesh Patel, who's trying to basically wrangle all these big personalities, which includes this European director who hails from the art house, and he's trying to wrangle meaning out of his green screen monstrosity with all the fish people in it. And you get a studio executive meddling in. You have an actor who belongs in the theater and keeps reminding people of that because he's so embarrassed about the kind of Jim Henson-like costume he's acting in, and he's acting opposite the beefcake actor who's really serious about being a hero. And so all of that, it's just giving you the vibe. It's giving you all those big personalities, but it's also giving you the crew, the people who are legitimately trying to put in good work and trying to give the best possible product they can, even though they're taking their orders from studio directives and algorithms, and they're taking directives from people who have like trying to do better by the soulless product they're ultimately creating.
Okay, first of all, aside from using words like the soulless product that they're creating, I should just tell people who are listening to this that because I'm looking at you, I can see that you're levitating as you get a chance to talk about this, because a Marvel hater loves nothing more than the moment to sort of pull together all the threads of hatred. Okay, let's get into it. You and I have had like a lot of conversations on the show, off the show, about the idea of the Marvelization of cinema and like the pitfalls of all these sort of comic book franchises. I want you to take a listen to this pivotal moment from the franchise. This is where a studio rep visits a set to tell the movie's director, who's like, as you mentioned, this indie art house guy, that there has been a bit of a change.
So we massacred the fish people. Man, woman, child, brutal, devastating, badass.
The fish people are in my movie.
Oh, sure. Or are they?
No, but they are.
But all I'm saying is they've been slaughtered in the movie sequentially prior to the one you're making, so...
I'm sorry, I'm just trying to recalibrate my sense of the universe.
Oh, sure. You take your time, sir. I get it. Everything's connected. It's all just one big thing.
The fish people are carrying a lot of thematic luggage.
All right. Look, Centurios 2 is our tent pole. Right? Without our tent pole, we don't have a tent. And without a tent, we get eaten in our sleep by 9-year-old TikTok kids with superhero fatigue.
I just love that moment so much. How realistic do you think that moment is?
That moment is so good and so on point. And I mean, clearly, like that's a moment that's sort of referencing the big massacre in one of the Avengers movies. But in terms of like real examples of how kind of the corporate overall planning or chronology of these movies messes with an individual film, like we've seen different instances of it. Like most recently, you think of like the WandaVision to Doctor Strange and Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness situation, where Wanda,
I can see how much you've hated saying these words, but yes.
Oh my
continue.
God, there's just too many words. Too many words. But like, here's the thing. You might remember I was actually a fan of WandaVision, because WandaVision is a TV series starring Wanda. This good show, real emotional journey. Yeah. And then you get to Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness, and the entire emotional arc of Wanda has just been erased because the people making Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness had no idea what was going on in WandaVision because it was bumped up. And so even like Elizabeth Olsen, who plays Wanda, she told us you should watch all her interviews, because she's just like, I was on set, I'm like, did y'all see what happened in WandaVision? They're like, no, because it's not even done yet. How are we making this movie and not knowing that you are not supposed to be a villain? You've had this wonderful emotional journey. So that kind of stuff, that was a recent example of how, like, these different parts aren't speaking to each other. But also you can go all the way back to a decade ago when Edgar Wright quit Ant-Man.
Yes.
Why did Edgar Wright quit Ant-Man? Edgar Wright was this Ant-Man was his passion project. He was developing that movie. Edgar Wright being the director of Shaun of the Dead.
Edgar Wright does not need to do Ant-Man. He was doing it because he loved the specific comic. Yeah.
And he was developing Ant-Man before Iron Man came out, before there was an MCU. And so then, like, as it's finally going, as the MCU is giving him the green light to go, they kept meddling with this movie and saying, well, now you have to incorporate, the Falcon, and you have to incorporate this chronology, until he finally is like, forget it, I quit. And he left. That was like the first big departure. It's because of this overwhelming, like how the corporations just basically tell you what story to tell.
Yeah, and you hear that in that clip, right? You hear the executives say, well, we are privileging the tentpole, and in the tentpole, they kill all of these people. And what really struck me about his tone was I guess the carelessness, like the idea of it's like, it doesn't matter. Yes, we've committed a genocide against these people, but now you just have to sort of figure out how else your movie's going to fit into this world. Look, can we just talk about the origin points of the franchise for a moment? Because I think we've needed a show that skewers the MCU and skewers the Marvelization of cinema for a minute.
Mm-hmm.
People have said that The Boys does that. I'm like, I don't think The Boys does that at all, or not as effectively as this does anyway. So talk a little bit about the origin points of the show.
I mean, because you mentioned that Sam Mendes is a director on the show. He's one of the executive producers, right? So you might remember that Sam Mendes was the caretaker of the Bond franchise for 2 movies, right? He made, what was it? Skyfall, which is really amazing, and Spectre, which kind of fell apart. And so a lot of the grievances that we're feeling in the show, I think, are rooted in Sam Mendes' grievances of feeling kind of the corporate franchise branding, dictating what he needs to do with this franchise. And I think you especially see that in the Bond movie that he wasn't a part of, where all of a sudden Bond is having to make up for the misogyny of his legacy. They tried to make it more female, skew it more female, with Phoebe Waller-Bridge becoming brought on to do touch-ups, and they introduced Lashana Lynch as the new 007 and stuff, and so kind of bending to the current cultural moment. And actually, the best episode of this series, I think, kind of touches on that. My favorite episode of the franchise, the 3rd episode, is when they're trying to deal with the woman problem, which is like, look, not a new problem. We see how cynical Hollywood does this before, but basically these guys are trying to virtue signal and be in line with, like, they're calling out our franchise for being so boy central. And look, I thought we offshored our women problem to that women movie about the women superheroes with the women director, with the women DP and all that stuff. I thought we dealt with that, but no, this movie has a woman problem. So then they put it on the one female producer who then her solution is give that one female character a bigger stick. But why this episode works so well is because Catherine Waterston plays this woman kind of supporting superhero figure, and she wants out. She doesn't want any of this emotional torment anymore, because the toxic fandom that is very real keeps bullying her, because she keeps all the virtue signaling is putting on her shoulder. So that performance, the emotions of that performance, is what nails that episode.
Can I just say, like, the woman problem? I love that episode. I love that. I love the storyline that you're talking about, but it also references a very specific and real scene in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, which is at the end of Avengers Endgame, which I know is a movie you're never going to see. But there is sort of this moment where, like, one of the heroes needs to sort of accomplish a thing, and then Marvel was like, we got it. We'll figure it out. We're going to put every woman character into this one shot so you can never criticize us. And you literally just sort of have a progression of all the women characters in the movies. And the moment is alternatively kind of held up as like, look, isn't it wonderful that Marvel did this? And also, oh my God, it's so horrible that Marvel would tokenize these characters in this way. Like,
has anyone said it's wonderful?
I think some people, listen, some people have certainly shared that moment of being like, oh my God, look at this moment, this powerful instance of women power in Marvel movies.
They were Marvel bots. That's what they were.
Okay, they were. You're right. They were Marvel bots. I apologize. Of course, that's who they were. But that's anyway. It's referencing a very real scene, a very real reaction to that scene. Last word to you, pal. Do you like the franchise? Is it working for you as a show?
Look, I appreciate its existence because, because you can only express this stuff in this guise of fiction, right? If you think about how, when David Simon wrote The Wire, like cops would only tell him about the real stuff that goes down under the veil of fiction when he wasn't being a journalist, when he was telling. So I appreciate that this show exists on that front. At the same time, like, this show doesn't have any jokes beyond what we've been making fun of on film Twitter for the last 5 years. And so it's like, I feel like a lot of us who are in these conversations are kind of 3 steps ahead of the show.
I take that point, but also what I'm encouraged by, what I'm cheered by, is the idea like this is going to be new to a lot of people, and if it's going to be new to a lot of people, like, they get to wrestle with it before they get to go see the next whatever Marvel movie is. And you know what? I'm going to be there, so maybe I'm the problem. Brad, I got to leave it there, but I appreciate you. I'm always a problem. I appreciate you. You're the best, man. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
You bet. Rad Simonpillai is a film critic with CBC and CTV. You can stream the franchise on Crave. That is it for the show today. My name is Elamin Abdelmahmoud. This show is called Commotion. We'll be back tomorrow. I'll see you then.